My name is Isabella Trent, and until 9:37 a.m. this morning, I was a senior strategic advisor at Lexmark Analytics, a mid-sized tech firm headquartered in Chicago. That's what my ID badge still read when I walked into the ballroom at the Maxwell Hotel. I'd spent 7 years grinding through underfunded initiatives, abandoned campaigns, and late-night brainstorms no one remembered. And then finally, I landed the one thing the company had been chasing for over a decade: Ridgemont Financial. A contract worth over $400 million in projected lifetime value. The email said it was a historic day. Full team assembly, open bar, even a jazz trio playing near the buffet. The kind of event you throw when someone retires, or when someone saves the company. Apparently, I had done the latter. So when the CEO, Nathan Caro, called me on stage, I allowed myself one small breath of relief. Maybe, just maybe, I had finally become more than the woman buried in spreadsheets. The lights were bright, the applause loud, and the glass trophy in his hands glimmered with my name. But just as he leaned in for the photo op, he whispered behind his perfect smile, "There's a severance letter under your chair. Effective immediately." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. Maybe the music distorted his words, or the flash of cameras had thrown me off. But Nathan Caro, CEO of Lexmark Analytics, wasn't the type to make mistakes with words, especially not when they cut this deep. "There's a severance letter under your chair. Effective immediately." He pulled back into the camera's eye, still grinning for the crowd. I mirrored him instinctively, a reflex. That's what years in corporate culture teach you: never stop smiling, no matter how sharp the blade in your back. The room thundered with applause. Banners above read, "Lexmark rises." Team members stood, clapping harder. Some cheered. From the outside, it looked like celebration. But inside me, something hollowed out. My hands tightened around the trophy, a polished, curved thing that had just transformed from symbol of recognition to the heaviest object I'd ever held. I couldn't feel my legs. But I nodded anyway, smiled anyway. Because the camera lens doesn't care about betrayal. It only wants the image. As I made my way off stage, the music started again, drowning out the echo in my ears. I walked past colleagues I had mentored. Late nights spent in Google Docs. Side-by-side slide edits. Strategy decks built during holidays. Some smiled politely. Others avoided my gaze. One even gave me a small, awkward thumbs up. None of them knew. Or maybe some did. I returned to my seat, hands trembling as I reached beneath the chair. There it was, a white envelope. No name, no logo, just one word in bold font: confidential. Before I could open it, a voice behind me said, "Isabella, may I have a word?" I turned to see Dana Marquez, head of our, standing there with that signature HR expression, calm, unreadable, like she was watching you drown from the lifeboat. I followed her out of the ballroom. Past the bar, past the smiles, into a quiet hallway lined with framed photos of past milestones. Product of the Year, Top 100 Tech Firms, Lexmark Innovation Award, all hollow now. We stepped into a glass conference room. Dana closed the door slowly, like a person ending a conversation before it began. "We intended to handle this after the event," she began, sliding a thick folder toward me. "But there's been a change in timing." The folder landed with a quiet thud. I hadn't opened the envelope yet. But I didn't need to. Her words confirmed it. My position had been dissolved due to budget restructuring and executive realignment. "But I just brought in Ridgemont Financial," I said, my voice barely audible. "You told me last week we'd be expanding my team. I saved Q2 projections." Dana nodded sympathetically. "Rehearsed. You've done incredible work, Isabella. But these decisions were finalized by the board." I stared down at the folder, fingers numb. I thought of all the holidays I'd worked through. My dad's birthday I missed because of the pitch deck. The Thanksgiving I spent in a hotel room finalizing projections. The friend's wedding I skipped to prep for the Ridgemont call. All the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, all thrown away with one whisper behind a smile. I walked out of the building in a daze, the trophy still in my hands. Like a twisted souvenir of the day I stopped existing to the people I had helped succeed. That night, I couldn't sleep. The city outside my window pulsed with weekend energy. But my apartment was cold and still. I sat on the couch in the dark. The envelope unopened beside me. The trophy resting on the counter like a cruel joke. I kept thinking about Clause 18C. In a flash, the memory came back. The fourth-floor boardroom. The negotiation with Greg Hanley. Ridgemont's lead counsel. They'd been burned by mismanagement in a previous contract and insisted the new agreement include a clause for oversight. I had insisted on being the named strategic lead. Clause 18C. All strategic oversight, deliverables, and communication shall be managed by Isabella Trent. If at any point Isabella Trent is no longer employed at Lexmark Analytics, Ridgemont Financial reserves the right to reassess or terminate the agreement without penalty. They had signed it. Lexmark Legal had skimmed it. Greg had insisted on it. I hadn't pushed back. I'd welcomed it. Not to be petty, but because I'd earned that authority. And now? They had just fired the one person the deal depended on. I opened my laptop and pulled up the final contract, scrolling until I found the page. There it was. Section 18. Paragraph C. Clear. Binding. Unambiguous. The quiet panic inside me shifted. Just a little. I sat up straighter. Maybe they thought they'd cut me out. Maybe they thought they'd used me up. But they'd just fired the foundation of the deal they were celebrating. And if I wasn't part of the delivery team, Ridgemont had every right to walk away. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was readiness. Not for revenge. For reclamation. By morning, I had the contract printed. I was still unsure what I would do with it. But I knew this much. Lexmark had celebrated me as their savior and discarded me like a prop. They had played their hand. And they didn't even realize I still held the ace. I stared at the paper for a long time. Not moving. Barely breathing. Clause 18C wasn't just a line of legal language. It was a lever. One I hadn't known I'd need. But had instinctively fought for. Now it was the one thing standing between Lexmark and the collapse of the deal they had built their entire quarter on. I kept thinking. They didn't read it. They didn't know what they'd done. I got in my car and drove aimlessly through the streets of Chicago. It was past midnight. The skyline glittered like a city on the verge of something. Either greatness or collapse. I didn't know which one yet. But I knew where I needed to go. The lakefront. There was a spot near the Adler Planetarium. A quiet bench behind a row of hedges. Facing the black waters of Lake Michigan. I used to come here during high-pressure campaigns. It was the only place that reminded me I was real. That numbers and pitches weren't all there was. I parked, walked the path, and sat down. Trophy still in my bag. The contract in my coat. The cold air hit me like truth. It didn't care about office politics or padded bonuses or hollow applause. It just was. I closed my eyes. The late nights, the sacrifices, the time I gave up, the pieces of myself I gave away. And now? Now, I had something that mattered more than applause. Leverage. I opened my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found him. Miles Ridgemont. The CEO's younger brother and director of strategic partnerships at Ridgemont Financial. He had been the calm voice during every negotiation. Thoughtful, ethical, decent, the kind of man who said what he meant and didn't hide behind jargon. I hovered my thumb over the call button for nearly 5 minutes. Then I pressed it. It rang twice. Isabella? His voice was sharp, surprised, but not unfriendly. Miles, I said, swallowing back the knot in my throat. I know it's late, but I wouldn't call unless it mattered. There was a pause. Talk to me, I explained, quickly, clearly, no spin, no bitterness, just facts, that I'd been terminated, that Lexmark had cut my mic at the ceremony, that they'd quietly replaced me without informing Ridgemont. And then I said the most important words of the night. They violated Clause 18C. He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was tight. Did they notify us? No. Did they assign anyone to replace you officially? They haven't reached out to your team at all. I could almost hear the wheels turning on his end. Do you have the contract? He asked. Printed and in hand. He exhaled hard. You're not bluffing. Never have. Another pause. Then, quietly. I told Greg we shouldn't sign without their leadership sitting in. He insisted on you. Said you were the only reason he trusted Lexmark. And now? And now, he said, voice hardening. We may need to revisit that trust. He paused again. Can you meet me in the morning? We're in town for the FinTech Summit. I can make time before the first panel. Yes, I said instantly. Name the place. The Weller Hotel. Conference level. 7:15 a.m. Bring the contract. The line went dead. I stared out over the lake. Heart pounding. Hands cold. The water rippled like ink in motion. Somewhere behind me, the city was still alive. But inside, I felt awake. I got up and walked back to the car, feeling something I hadn't in days. Clarity. Not revenge. Not anger. Power. At 7:12 the next morning, I stood outside the conference room at the Weller Hotel. A slim folder tucked under my arm. My suit was pressed. My shoes quiet. I had slept exactly 90 minutes, but felt sharper than I had in years. The door opened. Miles stood inside, flanked by Celeste Nguyen, Ridgemont's in-house legal counsel, and Avery Penn, head of strategic risk. He waved me in. Let's be quick, he said. This won't take long. I laid the contract on the table. Open to Clause 18C. Handed Celeste the backup copy. She read it, then looked at Avery. No words were exchanged, just a silent nod between professionals who had just seen something irrevocable. Miles turned to me. If Lexmark voided the clause, the deal's breachable. I didn't void anything, I said plainly. You want to take this direct? He asked. I formed my own agency last night. I've already filed for INE. The name's Trent Strategies. I have a transition roadmap and a soft re-onboarding plan for Ridgemont. Seamless. Clean. No disruption. Celeste glanced up from the document. Do you own the strategy decks? The pipeline models? Yes, I said. Independent IP. Developed under advisory capacity. Lexmark doesn't have license to them. Another pause. Then Miles extended his hand. Send me the full roadmap by noon. We'll start transition paperwork tonight. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't need to, because this wasn't a gift. It was recognition. By 3:30 p.m. that day, Lexmark's legal team was on damage control. Word had leaked that Ridgemont Financial was severing ties. Dana left a voicemail I didn't return. Nathan sent a terse email I archived without opening. I didn't respond to the panic. I didn't need to, because the moment I walked out of that hotel with the signed transition memo in hand, I wasn't the discarded strategist who had been ambushed on stage. I was the storm they didn't see coming. And I was just getting started. By the time the ink dried on the Ridgemont transition agreement, something inside me had already begun to shift. It wasn't loud. There were no fireworks. Just a slow, deliberate settling of the dust. For the first time in nearly a decade, I didn't belong to anyone else's timeline. I wasn't waiting for an internal approval, a board meeting recap, or some glass-walled executive to validate my worth. I was mine again. That night, I sat at my kitchen counter. Laptop open. Trophy shoved into a drawer. My inbox was overflowing. A few colleagues from Lexmark sent half-hearted, sorry to hear, messages. 2 former clients reached out, asking if I was available for independent consulting. I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't rushing anymore. Instead, I opened a blank document titled Trent Strategies, Foundations. And I started writing. Not a mission statement, not a tagline, just the truth. What kind of business would I build if I wasn't trying to survive? If I wasn't chasing recognition? What would it look like if I stopped reacting and started letting? The question cracked something wide open. I thought about the nights I cried silently in the bathroom between meetings. About the energy I'd spent second-guessing myself every time someone called me too ambitious or hard to work with, just because I didn't shrink. About the talent I watched get pushed out because it threatened the egos of men who had never built anything but stories. And I realized something. I wasn't leaving the system. I was building a better one. The next morning, I called Maya Collins, a financial analyst I'd worked with 5 years ago, sharp, steady, and underappreciated. She picked up on the second ring. Maya, it's Isabella. I have a proposition for you. Say no more, she replied, voice fierce. When do we start? Within 48 hours. We were a team of 3. Maya brought in Jonas Price, a UX strategist who had left Lexmark last year after his department was downsized. He was already prototyping a dashboard by the time we met on Zoom. We didn't have office space. So we worked out of a cafe in West Loop, nothing fancy. Just Wi-Fi and caffeine and elbow grease. And it was honest. We didn't talk about disruption or scale or virality. We talked about how to protect good people. How to design contracts that don't erase the humans behind the work. How to rebuild trust in an industry that had forgotten what integrity looked like. Every word felt like a breath of oxygen after years in a windowless room. On the fourth day, I got a call from Avery Langston, CMO of Harbour & Wells, a legacy client I'd managed for 2 years before being sidelined by Lexmar's internal shuffle. "Isabella," she said, "I've heard what happened, and frankly, I'm furious." I stayed quiet. "Not just for you. For all of us who've been dismissed mid-victory." I exhaled. "Avery, if you're looking to move the account." I'm not looking," she interrupted. "I am moving it, if you have room. I'd like to bring our business to Trent Strategies. Full transition. No PR noise. Just clean, confidential execution." That was the moment it hit me. I didn't need to chase down justice. Justice was finding me. That weekend, I took a break from the swirl of onboarding, documents, NDAs, and pitch decks. I drove to Evanston, where my parents still lived in the same blue-gray house on the edge of town. My mother greeted me at the door with a hug that didn't require explanation. She didn't ask about Lexmar. She just said, "You look lighter." We sat on the back porch, sunlight cutting through the leaves. She made tea the way she always had, over-steeped and comforting. I was fired during my own celebration. I finally said, voice quiet. She didn't flinch. "That sounds like the kind of move people make when they're afraid of you." I looked at her, startled. "You've always been a little terrifying," she added with a wink. "In the best way." We sat in silence, letting the breeze do the talking. And then she said something I'd never forget. "The trick isn't avoiding betrayal. It's surviving it with your name intact." The following Monday, we filed LLC papers, launched a basic landing page, and submitted our first invoice as Trent Strategies. By Friday, we had 5 active clients. Each one came to us quietly. Each one said the same thing. "We've been looking for someone like you. Not a brand, a backbone." Lexmar, meanwhile, was scrambling. Their senior sales director resigned unexpectedly. The CTO posted a vague message on LinkedIn about seeking new challenges. Someone forwarded me a screenshot from their internal Slack channel. "Does anyone know where the predictive model files are stored? We can't access the client-facing version." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Lexmar hadn't just lost me. They had lost the future I had built for them, and didn't even realize it until it was gone. On the 10th day of Trent Strategies' existence, we signed our third 6-figure account. And I did something I hadn't done in years. I slept through the night. No emergency emails. No late-night calls. No half-hearted compliments wrapped in condescension. Just peace. Not because I'd arrived, but because I was finally steering. Not away from the past, but into a future that bore my signature. And that changed everything. 2 weeks after launching Trent Strategies, the air in my apartment smelled less like desperation and more like possibility. The walls still held the echo of sleepless nights and stress-fueled pacing, but now they also held something new. Movement. Clients were calling. Invoices were clearing. Strategy decks were being reviewed and approved without endless revisions from someone with VP in their title and nothing in their calendar. We were small, yes, but we were moving. That morning, I was on my second cup of coffee and reviewing a draft proposal when my phone lit up with an unexpected name. Martin Haverford, Managing Director at Cypress Atlas Capital, one of the largest private equity firms in the Midwest. Lexmar had tried to land them for years. Unsuccessfully. I answered with careful neutrality. "Isabella Trent." "Ms. Trent," he said, voice smooth and practiced. "I've been following your recent elevation." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling it now?" He chuckled. "Let's just say you've made an impression. Word is, Ridgemont shifted their entire portfolio to you without blinking." "That's true. And Harbour & Wells followed shortly after?" "Yes." A pause. "I'd like to talk about Cypress. We've been considering a new strategic direction. Something leaner, more values aligned, less corporate theater." I smiled at that. "And you think we fit that mold?" "I know you do. I've reviewed your public filings, your strategy white papers, hell, even your launch post. You didn't waste time marketing. You just delivered. Another pause. This one loaded. We're ready to move our business if you're willing to take us. If I was willing. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window. The city below was bathed in sunlight, a far cry from the fog that had wrapped around me that first night after the severance. You'd be our biggest client, I said, measured. Would that be a problem? No, I replied, but it comes with conditions. Let's hear them. I listed them one by one. Full access to decision makers. Clean contract language. No red tape branding override clauses. Quarterly review alignment based on metrics, not optics. There was a pause, then a quiet laugh. You're serious about this? Very. Good, he said. So are we. He sent over a term sheet within the hour. I reviewed it with Maya and Jonas. There were a few minor sticking points, but nothing fatal. By that evening, we had submitted a revised draft and scheduled the formal onboarding call. It was happening. The firm that Lexmark had spent nearly 5 years courting. The client they had burned tens of thousands on trying to impress with splashy campaigns and endless dinners. They were coming to us. No steak dinners. No boardroom theater. Just clarity. 3 days later, I found myself in a second-floor loft in the River North District. Standing in what would become our first real office. It wasn't glamorous, high ceilings, exposed beams, a scuffed concrete floor, but it was ours. We signed the lease before noon and moved in with 3 laptops, 2 rolling chairs, and 1 plant Jonas insisted on naming, Chairman Leaf. There was no receptionist, no elevator pitch framed on the wall. But there was a whiteboard already filled with launch sequences, retention models, and 1 bold phrase in Maya's handwriting. No applause, just results. We were building more than a company now. We were building credibility. Cypress Atlas came on board quietly. But the industry felt the ripple. Within 72 hours, 2 smaller firms reached out. Then a Fortune 100 prospect emailed asking for a discreet conversation. We didn't go viral. We went visible, to the right people. And in the background, Lexmark was unraveling. A mutual connection sent me a private screenshot from their Slack thread. It read, "Anyone know why half the dashboards are down? Where are the files from the Ridgemont build? Wasn't Isabella managing that?" The answer, of course, was yes. And the reality, now, was no longer their concern. The real surprise came the following Friday. I was stepping out of a midday check-in when I saw a new email ping. Subject: Invitation. Midwestern Innovation Forum keynote. I clicked it, expecting spam or some chain referral. But no, it was real. They wanted me to open the conference. Not on behalf of Lexmark. Not as a case study of someone wronged. But as a founder. A strategic voice. A builder. The note was short. Ms. Trent, we believe your recent journey speaks to the moment we're in, where leadership is being redefined by clarity, character, and quiet power. Would you join us as our keynote speaker? I read it twice. Then a third time. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just sat there, laptop open, feeling something solid settle in my chest. Not pride. Not relief. Readiness. That night, I didn't write a speech. I wrote a framework. Because if this new opportunity meant anything, it meant this. I wasn't just being invited to the table anymore. I was designing it. 3 weeks into leading Trent Strategies, I stopped feeling like someone who had been fired. I wasn't rebuilding anymore. I was building. And not just systems, pipelines, or client portfolios. I was building something quieter and harder to measure. A company culture rooted in trust. Not fear. The first sign of real growth wasn't financial. It came during a Tuesday morning stand-up when Jonas, normally quiet, paused before ending his updates. He looked around the room. A growing team of 7. All gathered around mismatched desks in our scrappy River North loft, and said, "I've never worked somewhere where I wasn't waiting to be replaced." Silence followed, then a few nods. Someone murmured, "Same." I didn't say anything right away. Because I knew that feeling too well. That constant, quiet terror that your job was borrowed. That your value expired the second you made someone else uncomfortable or outshone the wrong manager. I closed my laptop, stood up, and looked at the team. No one here was hired to survive. You're here to lead. It changed something. That afternoon, Maya posted a company document titled, House Rules, in our shared drive. Rule 1. Strategy without integrity is just manipulation. Rule 2. No politics. No drama, just clarity. Rule 3. Everyone has a voice. Especially the quiet ones. Rule 4. Burnout isn't a badge. Rest is mandatory. Rule 5. We don't scale toxicity. Ever. I didn't edit a word. Because Maya had captured what I hadn't even said out loud yet. This place wasn't about proving ourselves. It was about proving that another way was possible. The day we moved into our second office, just one floor up with an actual conference room and a working espresso machine, I took 15 minutes to myself before unlocking the front door for the team. I stood at the glass wall, staring out over the city. It was raining, soft, steady, not the storm kind, the cleansing kind, and I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who triple-checked her decks before every presentation, hoping someone would finally say she belonged. The one who smiled through backhanded compliments. The one who didn't speak up when someone else took credit for her work because she was afraid of being labeled difficult. I whispered to the rain. She deserved better. Then I turned and walked into the future she had earned. Growth didn't come all at once. It came in little wins that felt like turning pages instead of flipping switches. It came when Luis, our newest creative strategist, once fired for being too outspoken, pitched a campaign model that impressed a Fortune 100 client enough to increase their scope by 30%. It came when Ari, a former intern who used to be afraid to speak in meetings, asked to lead a cross-functional session on client lifecycle metrics, and crushed it. It came when Maya called me at 7:12 p.m. one Thursday just to say, "You know what? I don't dread Mondays anymore." That one made me cry. I started saying yes to things I used to shy away from. Keynote panels, women in leadership spotlights, podcasts hosted by up-and-coming MBA students who reminded me of myself 10 years ago. But I said no to the things that didn't align. A VC firm offered us a large investment, at the cost of board seats and market optimization feedback. I politely declined. "We're not building a unicorn," I told them. "We're building a blueprint." Then came the Lexmark implosion. It didn't happen overnight, but the signs were clear. One by one, clients peeled away. Public statements were never made. But people knew. There was a silence around the company now, not of reverence, but avoidance. An industry analyst emailed me anonymously. "They're trying to rebuild your systems. They don't even know how deep your architecture went. It's unraveling slowly, like a house wired by a ghost they didn't believe in." I never replied. I didn't need to. The scoreboard was no longer mine to check. One Monday, I received a handwritten note. No return address. Just a single sentence, scrawled in careful cursive. "Thank you for reminding me that quiet doesn't mean weak." No name. No clue who sent it. But I smiled. Because I wasn't in this to be remembered by name. I was here to prove that you can lead without destroying. By the start of month 4, Trent Strategies had 10 clients, 11 team members, and a waitlist. We brought in a fractional CFO, hired a part-time therapist for burnout prevention sessions, implemented Focus Fridays, no meetings, no calls, just thinking time. And when one team member needed to step away for a month to care for a sick parent, we covered the gap without hesitation. Because we weren't just scaling a business. We were scaling humanity. One Friday evening, after locking up, I walked through the loop with my coat collar up and a hot drink in hand. Downtown was buzzing. Office buildings were still lit. Cabs zipped by. I passed the Lexmark building. Out of habit, I glanced up at the 18th floor, once my floor. Lights off, logo dim, a ghost office. But I didn't feel bitterness. I felt nothing. And sometimes, that's the greatest piece of all. That night, I got home and opened a blank page in my journal. At the top, I wrote, "What I've learned." And beneath that, I scribbled the first 3 lines. Let them doubt you. Let them replace you. Then build something they can't replicate. I didn't expect to cry when I walked onto that stage. The room wasn't particularly glamorous. Just a hotel ballroom with standard issue chairs and spotlights too bright for comfort. The National Ethics in Leadership Summit wasn't exactly headline-making. But the attendees? They were real, mid-career professionals, young consultants, HR leaders, analysts, founders in hoodies. All of them had one thing in common. They'd been watching. Some had followed my journey through quiet LinkedIn posts and whispers across boardrooms. Others had only heard of Trent Strategies in passing, unsure whether I was a disruptor or just lucky. But they were here, and they were listening. The event coordinator introduced me without flourish, just a simple, "Please welcome Isabella Trent, founder of Trent Strategies." Applause followed, polite, respectful, nothing over the top. I walked to the podium in a black blazer I'd worn 100 times before. No designer label, no stylist touch, just me. And this time, that was enough. I took a breath and began. 3 months ago, I was fired at my own promotion ceremony. Gasps. Some heads lifted, others tilted, intrigued. It wasn't a scandal. There were no raised voices. Just a handshake, a photo op, and a severance letter under my chair. I paused to let the silence settle. It took exactly 11 seconds to erase 7 years of work. 11 seconds for a leadership team to decide that once I delivered what they needed, I was disposable. A ripple of quiet discomfort moved through the crowd. But this isn't a story about being wronged, I continued. It's a story about what you do next. I told them about Clause 18C. About the lakefront bench. About the 7:15 a.m. meeting at the Weller Hotel. About the day Trent Strategies went live with 1 client, 2 team members, and a Google Doc titled, "Let's try this anyway." I didn't glamorize the grind. I told the truth. The exhaustion. The imposter syndrome. The nights I sat on my kitchen floor wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. And then I said this. Power doesn't always arrive with a title or a corner office. Sometimes, it starts when you realize you no longer need permission to speak. I looked out across the room. Faces leaning in now. Not out of politeness but connection. And I realized something. I wasn't inspiring them. I was reminding them of what they already knew. That leadership wasn't about dominance. It was about direction. That strategy didn't have to be manipulative. It could be honest. That we didn't have to play someone else's game when we could just build our own. I shared stories of my team. How Maya turned a burnout sabbatical into a client care model now adopted by 3 firms. How Jonas rewrote our pitch process to center psychological safety. How our intern Ari now leads onboarding for every new hire with a single guiding principle. Start soft. People bloom when they're safe. I shared how we measure success now. Client retention. Staff mental health metrics. A dashboard called Wins Without Sacrifice. No one clapped during that part. They didn't need to. They were too busy writing things down. At the end, I closed my notes and said one final thing. If your story begins with betrayal, don't let it end with bitterness. Let it end with a blueprint. Something others can walk across to find their own way out. And then I walked off the stage. No mic drop. No dramatic pause. Just a small nod. And a deep, quiet exhale. After the talk, people came up one by one. Not to pitch. Not to flatter. To thank me. One woman, maybe late 50s, gripped my hand and said, "I resigned last week. I didn't know if I was brave or stupid. Now I know. I was both. And that's enough." A man in his 30s with tired eyes whispered, "I've been afraid to speak for 3 years. I think I'm done being quiet." An HR director said, "I'm rethinking our entire exit process. No more NDA-covered goodbyes. People deserve dignity." I didn't say much, just listened, just smiled. And in those small, unflashy moments, I felt something deeper than recognition. Legacy. That night, I walked home alone. Rain had started again, soft and rhythmic. I didn't open my phone. I didn't check notifications. I just walked, one quiet block after another. No security badge on my hip. No title clinging to my identity. Just a founder of a company built on ethics. Just a strategist who remembered how to feel. Just a woman who was finally leading the way she was meant to. When I got home, I turned on the desk lamp, opened my journal, and wrote, "Quiet power is still power." And when you stop waiting for the stage, you realize, You already own the spotlight. Thank you for choosing to listen to this story among thousands of stories out there. Like and subscribe to continue listening to the latest stories.